Hello everybody, my name is James Cox. I'm in the Leadership 3300 class this course, or this term, and this is going to be my briefing. I'm turning in a little bit early due to conflict in my schedule, so thank you. We're going to be talking about Alexander the Great. Alright, Alexander the Great. The question is, was he a great leader? He's got great in his name and what he's called, so we're going to discuss that a little bit. So, main points for this briefing: we're going to talk about some facts for his life, we're going to talk about his leadership successes, and we're going to talk about some of his failures. So, who was he? He was 20 years old when he took the throne. Now, he had done some other things. He had tamed the wildest horse when he was 16 years old. When he was 13 years old, excuse me. And when he was 16, his father left him in charge of Macedonia while he went out and pursued the Persian. So he was in power from a very young age. He was able to reign over the Macedonian, and he conquered the Persians, and so over both of those empires, and it was the largest of any at that time. He was a handsome guy, and he was charismatic. That's what the research shows. He was also ruthless and merciless. He would give you an opportunity, which we'll look at some of his failures and successes, to join him, and if not, then he put you out, either sold you into slavery or just killed you. And he died at 32 years old. And his empire crumbled soon after his death, which we'll talk about a little bit about that and his failures. So, very young king. All right, some more facts. He was a military genius. One of the things that he used was his army's strengths to his advantage, and as well as his enemy's weaknesses. So if he had a more well-trained army, he would use their tactics to overcome a larger force. He would use the terrain that he was given. He would oftentimes retreat, and they would follow him only to fall into a trap, and he could cut them off from their resupplies. He would lead them into places if they had a fighting tactic where they used large amounts of people, where they can only use smaller amounts of people. He also assimilated people into his army from other places so that he could learn those fighting techniques. According to some of the research sources, he never lost a major battle during his life. He untied the Gordian knot. So in history, the Gordian knot was tied to a wagon, and it was said that anyone who could untie, in quotation marks, the knot would take over, have the greatest empire in the world, and would take over all of Asia. He tried and tried, as many people had tried to take over that, or to untie that knot. He finally stepped away for a few moments, drew his sword, and cut the knot in half. He said, "If I cannot do it this way, I will do it that way." He had Aristotle for his personal tutor. Not bad. I mean, that guy's made all kinds of inventions and all kinds of things in science and mathematics, so it's not a bad tutor. And Aristotle, when he tutored him not only in literature and philosophy, but both science and medicine. All of that led to his military intelligence. He knew if he had a large army, that large army also had to have a large amount of water, a large amount of food, a large amount of provisions for their animals and their all of the stuff that goes along with the army. So if he could cut those supply lines off, or if he could somehow infect those people with something, that it would decrease their ability to fight. So now let's talk, we're going to go to his leadership successes. So he had a lot of follower support. His men would follow him because he was in the trenches with them. And you'll notice I got some question marks up here, so that's also going to go back to one of his failures. So again, I'm dressed like a normal guy that you might see out you know, going to Walmart, going shopping, whatever. I don't have a suit and tie on or a fancy watch or anything. He would sometimes, from some of the research, shows that he would dress up as one of the guys. He would not have his royal battle stuff attire on. He wouldn't have his bodyguards with him. He would just be dressed up as one of the guys, so he could go in, kind of like the show Undercover Boss, and go in and see what those guys needed. Man, these guys are going to either make me or break me as far as when he first started. So he wanted to make sure they had the provisions that they needed, and he was with them. And they knew that, and they would follow him anywhere. Again, so he would make provisions to make sure that everybody had food, water, supplies, clothing, they were warm, not just the elite. He was also known as a leader. He led from the front. He was known to ride into the charge of battle. He was not sitting up on the hill waiting for the battle to unfold in front of him, as many generals would do. He wanted to be in the fight. Probably due to his young age, he's still gung-ho, ready to go. And he was also known as a great fighter as well as a great leader. He had a great prowess for actually fighting whenever he was called upon. The next one is vision. His vision was to expand the Macedonian Empire and to conquer all of Persia and all of Asia. His father told him at a young age, at 13, that he should look past Macedonia and look for something that was of equal greatness to him. So his men knew what that goal was. So he had a vision, and he had given that vision to his men. They knew what it was. They trained for it, they prepared, and they planned for that goal. He was also able to use diplomacy and also gave his armies or conquering territories the option of joining his ranks instead of being killed or forced into slavery. So by doing this, he made his ranks stronger. He learned different techniques, different medical techniques, different sciences. So this was a good success. So now we're going to talk about the third point, which is the failures. The empire growth led to paranoia. So remember I talked about dressing like as one of his guys in the trenches. Well, as the empire grew, as he became more and more powerful, more and more people said, you're great, as his name says. It led him to paranoia, thinking people were out to get him. He started killing people that were closest to him. He killed a lot of his senior generals. He became not self-aware or other-aware, which led to a lot of dissension in the ranks. He had no humility. He began to have, sometimes it was all about him. Fancy parties, disregarding the customs that had brought him to where he was. He began to think he was a deity, and that he could, no one was as good as him, and he could do no wrong. The biggest failure from the research is that he did not set up a succession plan. When he died at such an early age, it led to mass chaos and the destruction of the empire that he had created. So, summary, he was a very young king. He built a vast empire. He also died very young. He was a military genius and had a great teacher in Aristotle. He had a vision. His successes, he built a huge empire. He led from the front, and he had a lot of follower support. And his failures, he was not self-aware or other-aware, which bred dissension in his ranks. And all that he had accomplished was laid to ruin because he failed to provide for a successor. Thank you for your time, and here's some of the references that I had for my presentation. Thank you very much.